We've got a young lady joining us from Kennesaw, Georgia, Jenny Hodges. Hello, Jenny. Are you there?
Hey, I'm here.
Thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're kind of involved in this situation in Georgia where you're trying to pass basically a pro-life resolution to end the Holocaust in Georgia. And as I said a moment ago, it appears that you're getting some opposition from pro-lifers. What is that all about?
Well, I've only been in this for 8 months, so I'm going to obviously be talking from my personal perspective, but there were two pieces of legislation. It was HB 1, which basically is a bill that says Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court had no right to hear Roe v. Wade to begin with. That's out of their jurisdiction. It is the right of states to define murder and define how you prosecute for murder, and so it defines abortion as murder. And the prosecution for abortionists under a current Georgia code for murder. And then you had H.R. 536, which is your basic human life amendment that Thomas More Law Center wrote. And basically from the beginning, there was no common consensus. HB 1 has lived and died down at the Capitol every single year for the past 6 years, and no one has really known about it because the major pro-life entities, the Archdiocese and GRTL, have not supported it and haven't really said anything about it. So H.R. 536 was kind of their response to HB 1. But then the Archdiocese never ended up coming on board. Even as early as March of last year, they had already decided they weren't supporting it. They just weren't publicizing that fact. And so actually what I see happening here, all the pro-lifer leadership has been kind of going at each other's throats through this whole process, but the grassroots has actually been growing and getting more informed about what's going on in the abortion industry. So I think there's been a lot of victory in the last 8 months and even right now, but obviously this legislation didn't make it.
Well, one of the things that bothers me is there's a recurring theme that we hear. We heard it in South Dakota. We hear it every place this is brought up. This is not the time. And here, I was astonished at this, and I know that Father Pavone spoke out against this situation with the Diocese of Atlanta, the Catholic Diocese of Atlanta. A spokesperson for them, Pat Shiver, says, quote, "There needs to be some changes on the U.S. Supreme Court before that would be a consideration. In other words, we should go forward with these bills to protect the unborn." This is preposterous because, first off, when you pass a bill in a legislature that's going to be challenged and sent to the Supreme Court, it takes years for that to get there. Yes. No one can tell us sitting right here today who's going to be on the Supreme Court in 5 or 6 years when this bill might get there. They can't say that. In addition to that, we're never going to have a time in the history of this movement when there is absolute certainty that if we send a bill to the Supreme Court that it'll get confirmed. That time is never going to come. If we're going to stand around and wait for this moment of crystal clarity, right, to where we know for a fact that we send a bill to the Supreme Court that it's going to come out our way, we're never going to send another bill.
We're never going to do it. On top of that, we're always relying on the perfect cases.
Right.
If you've got good legislation, from my experience, good legislation and good law with good lower court precedents will almost always create good higher precedents.
Right.
Because lawyers and attorneys and judges, when they're under intense scrutiny and they've got to decide matters based on law, oftentimes, even if it doesn't fit their political agenda, they're forced to do the right thing. And oftentimes we put something up that's just crud.
Right. So
this is good law.
Jenny, let's ask Jenny, is that what they're telling you?
Well, yeah, I mean, the pro-life leadership is definitely infighting a lot, but I don't really think that that's why H.R. 536 failed. What we have today is a crisis in the legislature because the people of Georgia are pro-life, and everybody has to really run as pro-life in most districts in order to get elected, but we have elected legislators that are not pro-life. They have gotten the stamp of approval from Georgia Rights Life. They have been able to say that they're pro-life, even though they're not passing pro-life legislation. And even like with the Human Life Amendment, Georgia Rights Life had so many signatures on this thing, and they were pushing it under people's noses. You better sign this, or we're not going to give you our stamp of approval during the re-election. But none of those legislators that signed up did any effort to pass the legislation, and they were actually working against it, trying to make sure it didn't get to the House floor for a vote so they wouldn't have a record of voting against the Human Life Amendment.
But Jenny, the problem is if you've got pro-life leaders there who have other agendas, and who aren't committed to returning legal protection to every child, and you're a legislator, or you're a group of legislators who may be indeed at least quasi-pro-life, and you look out at that, you say, look, you guys come back when you've got your act together before you start leaning on me. But right now, they don't know which way to run because they're going to make somebody in the pro-life movement mad no matter what they do.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're exactly right.
So it is incumbent upon the leadership down there to get into a room and come up with a plan and say, okay, we are going to support this bill so that the legislature knows that, quote unquote, the entire pro-life movement is going to come raining down on me if I betray them on this. But right now, they don't get that sense.
Well, here is the monkey wrench that really screwed things up. I mean, absolutely, the Archdiocese was against us. National Right to Life Committee was against us from the beginning. But this is what really screwed things up when the legislative season started. Glenn Richardson made this comment last year that we can't overturn abortion because then we'd be overrun by blacks. Glenn is the Speaker of the House. So then some of the black leaders...
Jenny.
That one's not
Say that one more time.
Sorry. He said we cannot overturn abortion because then we would be overrun by blacks. See, abortion in Atlanta kills the vast majority is black children. The numbers that are on the books show it to be about 60% black children, but I think that number is closer to 80. There's a lot of abortionists that are not reporting their numbers. The clinics are in the black neighborhoods. Abortion's been running rampant in Atlanta for 35 years because everybody knows it's killing off the black population aggressively. This year we will lose at least 40,000 children to abortion in Atlanta. More than 25,000 of those will be black babies. So that's the dirty little secret.
Why wasn't this guy run out of office?
Mm-hmm. What?
Why wasn't this Glenn guy run out of office for that statement?
Okay, well, let me tell you this. There is also a buddy system among legislators, and that information wasn't really gotten out until the legislative season began. There were some people that were talking to Glenn privately behind closed doors. To some people, Glenn was denying it. To other people, he said, yeah, I said it. He was saying he was going to kill the legislation no matter what. Well, then there was a major luncheon last week on Tuesday, February 12th, I think it was. And this is a luncheon with the Cobb County GOP and some of the GOP heads from across the state, and Glenn Richardson was the keynote speaker. So I made sure that I got a front row seat, and after Glenn gave his address, I got up and I made a little bit of a scene. I showed the whole crowd a 24-week fetal model that I had, and I said we abort over 40,000 children a year in Atlanta, and most of these children are black. And then the chairman of the Cobb GOP, Scott Johnson, called me down and told me to stop making speeches and ask my questions. So I turned to Glenn and I said, we have HB1 and HR 536 in the House Judiciary Committee. What are you going to do to make sure these bills get to the House floor for a vote? Well, Glenn was furious. And he was really angry, red in the face, and said, I have absolutely no intentions of either bill getting to the floor for a vote. And there was a gasp in the room, and I knew that I didn't think that I'd gone over the edge, but I knew I'd gone right up to it.
That's right.
And and I needed Glenn to say that because everything was being whispered in dark shadows that he was going to kill this legislation, that he is. I believe that he has some race issues and some comments. Alveda King went to go see him last week and confront him about this quote, and he was really terrible. She was more angry when she left the office than she was when she got there. So this is an issue, and the legislators kind of cover for each other, I guess because they think that one day they're going to be in trouble and they're going to need everybody to cover for them. I'm not really sure why they're doing this. Glenn's having a very bad year. He's been duking it out with the governor this year. He opened the legislative season by repassing through the House 12 pieces of legislation that the governor vetoed last year. And he's really having a hard time keeping things under control down at the House. So there's a lot of other swirling issues along with this pro-life legislation.
Jenny, just keep us informed of what's going on down there. But this, by the way, this guy, Glenn, he's only expressing what legislators all over this country believe and don't have the courage to say. That's
right.
exactly
that's
what.
Exactly right.
That's exactly
that's a
what's
Planned Parenthood position, is
right.
What
That's
it is.
the Planned
He's
Parenthood.
he's towing the Planned Parenthood party line.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you, Jenny, for being with us. And
Thanks for talking to me.
go ahead.
Before you leave, I want to just encourage you. Here you are, a young pro-life person, just getting. We call you young only because you're just getting involved.
Because we're old.
She has some beautiful children. They can play some music too. But here you are, only been involved in pro-life movement 8 months. I say 9 months actually, because you started this thing process in your mind thinking so much earlier. But here you are, actively involved. And I want you to understand something. People used to tell Martin Luther King and other blacks, well, later. And he had to keep driving that point. When is later going to come? If not now, when?
Right.
And I want to I just want to encourage you to keep that mindset now, not later, now. And here listen, you are, one person, and you got more sense than Georgia Right to Life and National ever had.
But this is, Johnny, what you're saying is a lesson for the entire pro-life movement. If we're not going to protect these babies now, when are we going to? It's been 35 years down the road, and 50 million dead bodies piled up. When is the time?
How many do we have to kill for it to be the right time?
Yeah.
Anything else is just cowardice.
Right.
Well, I am very optimistic, actually.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited because this is an election year. Everybody's up for re-election. We need to bring it down to the counties. There's basically 3 counties in Atlanta that have the majority of the abortion clinics that are killing the most children. So that's 3 DAs that we have to get the communities to put public pressure on to make them prosecute these abortionists. They're totally lawless. They don't have ambulatory surgical licenses. I do not in any way, I'm not depressed, I'm not sad, I'm excited. So many people have climbed on board pro-life activism because they finally are getting educated and involved in the process and at the Capitol and calling their legislators. And now they're excited and they want to go forward. So I think it is time. I think that now we're going to move forward and get these clinics shut down and get some of these people booted from office in this re-election.
You're right. And her, the emotions that she's showing right now and the sentiments that she's giving us are what's being repeated in every state. Because like in South Dakota, when they were betrayed by pro-lifers, which shut down the effort, the people that came out of that were discouraged about that. Right. But over the overall scheme of things, they were encouraged, and we are making the progress that we need to be making.
Jenny is indicative of the entire pro-life movement, except for a few leaders that have got a stranglehold at the top.
And have other agendas.
Let's just get rid of them and move forward to victory.
Well,
exactly.
Again, Jenny, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks
and
for
you keep us posted on what's going on in Georgia.
Absolutely, I'll do it. Thanks.
Thanks.